In this section, we will focus on, as I said, understand how to set up a CI/CD pipeline for a .NET API project. And this project is a .NET 5 code, .NET 5 source code, and a very basic UI, but basic API. But we understand the internet details of how to set up a CI/CD pipeline. Okay, so to get started, this is the sample code. So I have a Azure repository wherein I have a sample code with a controller, which basically it's a hello world controller, but I pass a one of them is a get method. I pass the name and it returns me the hello the name which I pass. Right. So what we'll do is we will build this code, we'll deploy onto an Azure app service, and then go ahead and understand the details or the steps involved in going through the process. Okay, so for this purpose, this is the source code, and I have an app service created. This is the app service where we'll deploy this code and then have the API tested and work and see if it works or what are the issues we'll get into. Okay, so going back here now, I have a repository called API demo, and I have a code there with solution files and project files and what I need for building. So to get started with the pipeline, again in this webinar, we will focus on the visual editor or visual approach to create the pipeline. There will be another webinar focusing on the YAML file based. So, but here, in order to get started with a pipeline, to create a pipeline, we go into the new pipeline, and since I'm using a visual editor, I go into use the classic editor, and and first thing I need to do is I need to select the source code repository. Sorry. So first thing I need to do is I have to decide where is my source code. Right. In my case, it is in the Azure repos, but you can have it in GitHub or Bitbucket or any other source control mechanisms. Okay, so I'm selecting the project where I might have my source code, the repository, which is my API demo, and what is the default branch. So default branch is wherever you schedule or automated or manual builds, by default, it will pick up the branch that you select here. So I say continue, and here again you get some pre-built templates. I'll not use this. I'll go with an empty job so that I can show you the steps of how to configure for a API project. So once you are here, first thing is you have a name. Okay, name for the pipeline, webinar _22. I'll give a name as today's date. Okay. So then first thing is we decide what is the agent, where do you want to run the pipeline. So in this case, I'm using the hosted agent. We can have a self-hosted where you can have your own server where you can use that as an agent. For this purpose, I'll use the Azure pipelines, the hosted agents, which means that the pipeline tasks are executed on one of the Microsoft or Azure hosted VMs or the server. Okay, so I'm also specifying what kind of agent I need, whether I need a Mac agent or Linux or Ubuntu based or Windows based. So I can, in this case, mine is a .NET course, it doesn't matter, but I'll go with a Windows based agent. And the next set is to basically what we already identified, what are the repositories and the source code which needs to be used. And there are additional options, whether do you want to clean the folder every time you start a build, and do you want to start off as a fresh or a clean build, or is it fine if you have some residual binary files or DLL files? Then I'm basically saying clean up everything for every build, just ensure everything is cleaned up and you start as a fresh build. And then, this is a basic setup. And then you have your agent job, or again, this is the part where you give the steps or tasks that you want to execute. So again, here, when you say agent job, it runs on an agent. So agent is what we selected here. And this, whatever task we are going to configure here, will run on an agent. And similarly, there are other types. There's an agentless job, which means that sorry, it runs on the it doesn't run on the agent, but it may run on the target machine or a target server or on another server. Okay, so now in order to add a task, under this you can add multiple tasks. Generally, the steps is to get the latest code, you build the code, you generate the required artifacts and publish the artifacts into the pipeline or into an Azure artifact or any server. So what we have done is we have done the first step. We have configured the source code to be cloned. So we have that ready, and now we are trying to add. So since I said the project is a .NET Core project, so I basically have to I will end up using this particular .NET Core task. So as I said, when you're building a .NET code, you take the code, you do a restore to restore all the NuGet packages, and then you do a build. You publish the .NET code, .NET project to generate your published folder or files that you can deploy, and you finally in Azure Pipelines you publish as an artifact. So the first step here is to restore. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying go ahead and restore the project, restore the solution, the NuGet packages. That's the first step. Again, I can rename this. Okay, I'm going to restore NuGet packages example, right? And if I don't specify anything here, it would by default look for all the CS proj or solution files and just try to restore from there. There are additional settings where if you have your own private NuGet server, you can configure it here. So in this case, I'm just using the public one. So by default, it uses the public NuGet server. So once I restore, the next step is again to build. Either I can do a .NET, again I will add a task called .NET Core and select the command as a build command. So this takes care of building the code, build the source code. Okay, so now again, I'm not specifying anything, which means that it just looks for the CS Pro solution files in the root folder and just starts building. So once I do a build, the next step is to publish. If it's a web project, I can go ahead and publish as a zip with all the files, or depending on the project. So what I've done now, you can do anytime. You can just, if the same time you can clone it, keep cloning it as part of the task. So now once I do a build, restore and build, the next thing is to publish. So when I'm publishing, I can publish .NET Core artifact. Okay, so once I do this, I'm basically saying, publish all the web projects in the solution. So in my case, it's a .NET API project, which is a web. So automatically it will publish that particular project and zip that into a particular folder. So what I'll also provide is I'm going to mention where do I need the output files to be saved, right? By default, it saves in the .NET bin debug folder, release folder. So, but here I'm saying, specifically asking it to copy the output files into a particular folder. So what is this artifact staging folder? Is basically, if you go to the variables, now this is one of the predefined variable called artifact staging directory. So this is depending on the agent, depending on the pipeline, there's a folder structure created dynamically. And this artifact staging directly takes care of getting the artifact folder and the path of the folder depending on the agent and the pipeline. So we need not hard code it to a particular path or something. We cannot do that because we don't know which agent is picked up. Today it is agent 1, tomorrow it can be agent 5 or 10. So I'm going to specify using a variable. What this means is the code is built. After build, it is publishing the web API project into this path. So once I have the zip, in this case, because I'm saying zip the published project, so I have a zip of my API project. Now, how do I have to publish it as an artifact so that I can use it in my deployment pipeline. So again, there are tasks where I can say publish the build artifact. So here what I'm basically saying is whatever I have in the staging directory, go ahead and publish under a drop folder and make it available for me as an output of the pipeline. So what this does is, when we will see this when we run, so it does restore, build, it will publish, and whatever is inside the artifact staging directory is uploaded and published as an artifact into the pipeline. So let me save and queue. So what it does now is it goes and looks for the agent availability, because I said Azure pipelines, it will go and check whether are there any agents free, available, and then assign one of the agent to be picked up to pick up this job, right? So that's where it will try to so now it is still waiting for an agent to be assigned. Now you see the agent has been assigned. It will, if you see the agent details, it has picked up one of the hosted agent. So one of the key thing is a key information that you can look at while it is happening is, if you see here, this is what I was talking about. So it has, this is the path on this agent. Here S stands for the source folder. So whenever you check out, it will it's called build source directory, which the S is the source directory and artifact is the A directory. So if you go into the publish.NET Core, it has published into DA1 and then there's a A folder. So basically the source folder is under S and A is the artifact. And the one what you see here is assigned for the pipeline. Generally, if it is running on the same agent, it will always be one for a given pipeline, but you cannot rely on that. So this part is up to DA1 is dynamic. It depends on the agent, the pipeline, and various parameters. But this part is always same. So what I referred in the artifact as build artifact staging directory is this path, which is dynamically picked up depending on where it is running and when it is running. Okay, so now if you see the pipeline is successful. Now if I go to the one of the job, the successful job, you see there's one published and one consumed. So if I go into details, there's a drop folder and I have a zip of my API demo.zip, which basically contains all the folders which I need and the files I need to deploy into the app service. So this is where and other thing you need to know when you say edit is, right now it is manual, right? Somebody has to trigger the build. So how do we enable this is go to trigger and say enable continuous integration, which means that which basically enables when when developers commit the code, automatically a build is triggered, right? And here I can also control if we want to only enable a build to be triggered for a particular branch. If I say exclude, what it means is whenever developer commits to any branch but main branch, a build is triggered. But if something is committed into the main branch, build is not triggered. So maybe we'll have a different branch, only specific different pipeline for main with a different set of tasks. Maybe we'll have code quality, unit test, all these details, right? So depending on the filter, you can now once I say exclude and I'll do a save, what it means is whenever I do a change, if I go back to the, let me put it as include for now. Okay, so I'll do a save. And if I go back to the source code and let me do a small, just a comment just to simulate a change, right? So I'll just put a comment here, change for testing. Okay, I'll say commit. And once this similar to your simulates like your commit. Now, if you go back to the pipeline, there is a build trigger which goes through the same step as our manual build. It will go ahead and build the code and go ahead and deploy. At this point, it will just build and generate the artifact that you need. Okay, so this is the overall pipeline that you can use. Or the steps that you have to follow to create a pipeline for a .NET based API. Now, one thing is the steps remain same for any kind of pipeline, whether it's your front end, Angular, Java, or anything. But the overall steps remain same, but the task will vary depending on the technology. For an Angular or React, you may use an npm or a Node.js build, but for .NET you will use .NET Core. If you have a .NET 4.5 or Java, you will use a Maven tool. So depending on your technology, your steps will change, but your overall process of creating a pipeline remain the same. And generally, the steps is always you restore packages, you build, you publish, and publish it as an artifact. Okay, so before I move on to the deployment side, any questions? Anybody have any questions specific to here or specific to the CI pipelines? I see some of them have some of you have joined again. So I don't know if you have access to the link which I sent. So quickly, you all can, if whoever are joined new, to get access to the certificate and this recording, just enroll into this link which I sent as into the webinar course, and you'll get the access. Okay. So if there is no other queries, we can move into the deployment side of it. So maybe I'll give a minute for anybody to ask me questions. Okay. So since there's no questions, okay. So now in order to create a release pipeline, one thing we need is just checking. So I'm still audible, right? You all can hear me. Hello. Yes. Okay. Thank you. So now into the continuous deployment side. So what we're going to do here is basically deploy our artifact which we got into as part of our build, the zip folder, into an Azure app service. And the way I have already created app service, but I quickly show you the basic settings. So since since this is a regular API, not a container, right? The important thing is I've selected the published type as a code instead of a Docker container. So if we are using container based, we'll use this option, but I'm basically saying it's a regular app service, and I've selected the .NET 5 as the runtime stack, and it's a Windows based and basic app service plans. Okay, so what you see here, webinar net API demo is created using these settings. And now we will go ahead and deploy into this app service and test the API what you have. Okay, so going back here, going to the release. So before creating the pipeline, we need to establish a connection between Azure DevOps and Azure App Service or Azure Cloud. Right. So for enable, because you need to connect to a particular app service which is part of a resource group and deploy into that particular app service, right? So in order to establish the integration between Azure DevOps and the Azure portal or the cloud, we need to create something called a service connection. So service connection is generally used to integrate two systems or integrate a third-party system with Azure DevOps. So if you see here, you can integrate with Azure services, you can integrate with the Bitbucket, Chef, various commonly used DevOps tools. Okay, so in this case, I want to deploy into an Azure app service, which is part of a resource group. So I'm going to select, I want to integrate, I want to create a service connection which talks to a particular resource group. So again, I selected this type, I'll say next. And here it's saying, how do you want to connect? So, right, a service, whether you want to use a principal account, service principal account, or manually you want to create, give your identity, username, password, right? So I'm going to use the service principal because I'm already logged into with my account. So I'll say automatic service principal and next. So what it does is it basically logs in, uses the current logged in account and tries to authenticate and get all the information of the resource group that is required. So here again, I'll be using my app service is part of the resource group, Achaidemy resource group. So if you see here, this is the group. So I'll go ahead and say that this service connection connects to this particular resource group. So what it means is all the resources inside this particular resource group will now be accessible for your in your Azure DevOps to be, whether you want to deploy or connect or everything, it will be accessible. And I'm going to give a name. Okay, I'll say RG. Okay, so I'm basically giving a name which I can refer in my DevOps. And I also want to ensure all the new pipelines and existing pipelines have access to the service connection. So I'm saying grant access to all the pipelines which I have. So now this is where once I save, now I have a connection between my Azure resource group and Azure DevOps, which now I can use to deploy, to run scripts and do everything that I need. Okay, so this is the first thing. This is important step which you need to do before you start deploying into app service, whether in any cloud, even in AWS, Google, you still have to do something like this to establish this particular connection. So now going back to the deployment, so I say new deployment, a new pipeline. And first step is there are two stages in the two sections. One is the artifacts and what are the stages. So stages is, you can have any application will have a dev environment, you'll have a QA and stage and prod, right? Generally, you may have one additional stage or one less. But stage is each, you can have one section for dev stage followed by QA and QA stage and prod. So each of them is a stage, and you can connect them together to deploy to QA only after dev is approved and so on and so forth, right? And artifact is something where you decide where are my artifacts coming from. So when you say add, there are up to 9 options that you have at this point. So whether you can have one of the existing Azure repository itself as an artifact, or a GitHub, it is coming from GitHub, or it is coming from a container, Azure Container Registry in case of Docker images. And Azure Artifact is artifact server from Azure DevOps itself, where you can publish and access your artifacts, not just in the pipeline. In our case, our artifact is part of pipeline. So I have to select, I'm selecting here build. So what I'm basically saying is the artifact is available in one of the build pipeline which I've created. So again, I can select multiple projects. All the projects in the organization will be accessible here. So I've selected my project and I'm selecting the pipeline from where the artifacts are coming from. So the pipeline which I created here is available, webinar 22 October. So select this, and what is the default version you want to take when you're creating a deployment. So by default it is latest, but you can also say I will specify when I'm creating a release or a particular branch, particular tag, all the stuff. You can add filters based on that. So I'll select the latest, and there is a source alias name which we will use in the deployment stages to as a relative path to get the files. Right. So once I do an add, so now I have the artifact. So I'll go ahead and add a new stage. Again, here I will select empty job instead of using templates. So what I can do is, I can go here and rename this. I'll rename this to say development, right? And now again, just like your pipeline, you have an agent job, which means that this runs on an agent. You have deployment group job and agentless job, which are meant for if you're deploying in a VM or an on-premise server. We generally go for a deployment group job, and agentless job is something that you want to run. Example, in a continuous deployment, we use an agentless job where after deployment, if you want to run an automated API testing or QA functional testing, we use an agentless job so that you can run your scripts outside the environment and invoke the APIs or UI. Okay, so now the first step with respect to deployment, the core thing I need is app service deployment task. So this is again a task where I can specify where I want to deploy and what are the settings. So first thing I need to select is a subscription. So here you can see the service connection which I've created, right? So once I select this, automatically the connection with that particular resource group is established. If I'm not authorized, it will ask me to authorize. Example, if let's say I didn't create the service connection, I just have the subscription. So I select here, it will ask me to authorize. What it does is it will basically create the service connection on the background for you if you still haven't created, right? So in my case, I've already created, so I am using that here, and I'm saying it's a web app on Windows because as I showed you, I created it as a Windows app service. So that's what I'm selecting here, the type of the app service. And once I select the name, I have the app service which I've used, right? Which I've created. I'm going to use here. And once I have now I specified the resource group details, I specified the app service name or where I want to deploy. So next comes the where is your package or where is your zip your folder to deploy. So once you select the browse, so it will list down all the artifacts that we have added in here. So I can select directly the zip file, which means now here the alias comes into picture. So what it means is from the default working directory, go to the alias, because I can have multiple artifacts in a given pipeline. I may have multiple artifacts. Now if I have two now, right? So but in my case, I want to deploy from the 22 October pipeline, which has an alias something like this, right? So now I'm going to specify. Now if I go here again, I will see both the artifacts. So I can decide in one stage, I may, depending on your requirement, you may have multiple stages and multiple artifacts. Again, the scenario could be you have a repository artifact with all your unit automated test cases, and then you have a deployment, and maybe you have a Postman file for API testing, right? So I'm going to select the alias. I'm going to select the zip file which I want to deploy. It's not allowing me to save because I'm selecting the same thing, right? So I have this basic setup now done. And if you have an app service with slots, we basically enable this and then specify which slot I want to deploy. I don't have slots at this point. So once I deploy this, again, you have multiple options, like, what you want to do after deployment with respect to the app service. You want to run a script, or you want to do update some configuration files. All the config settings and app settings and configuration settings you can specify here and use variables for everything. Okay. So one other practice, good practice, that is I've seen working to ensure it works. You don't see deployment not working or the changes not being seen, is I generally recommend to stop and start the service before and after. So example, right, what I'll do is again I have to select I'm going to say that stop the app service as a first task, and then first I'm going to stop, then I'm going to deploy my changes, and then I'm going to start the app service again. So just to ensure all the new changes are sometimes your DLLs, your config files may not get picked up, the new ones, right? So this is a one option to ensure your app service is stopped, you deploy, and then you start again. If you're using slots, you specify the slot so that only that particular slot is stopped and started, and your overall application or a production server system may not go down, right? So you need to keep that in mind to specify the slots if you have it. So I'm going to rename this webinar CD demo October 22. Okay. So I'm going to save, and now I'll do a release. So now what we have is a deployment pipeline. Now every deployment pipeline will have releases. So you have a pipeline, and I'm specifying what is the artifact, which version of the artifact I want to use. By default, it is latest. It has selected 52, which is the latest build here. So once I create, there's a release one. This is where it will start deploying the zip output file onto the app service. So let's wait for it to complete the deployment. So yeah, so it has started again, the same folder structure. It has downloaded into release one folder with artifact A as the artifact folder, it does go ahead and download the artifact, and then it will try to deploy it into the app service. So yeah, so it is now downloading. Then it would since we added 2 artifacts, it is downloading both the artifact. Now it will stop the app service and go ahead and deploy the zip file which we have, and then start it back. So once this is done, we'll be able to invoke the API and see whether the output that we expect, which is basically, I'm going to call the hello world API and pass name as an input, and I expect an hello comma whatever name I specify as the response. And it's a get API, so I should be able to invoke it through the browser itself. I need not use a Postman or any post APIs. So going back to my CD, release 1 docs. Okay, so it is successfully deployed. So what I'll do is I'll copy the URL, base URL, and basically it's an API. So I'll say /API hello world, which is the controller name, and then I follow it by the ID or the name of the user. So now it says hello and then Chaitanya, which is the response of that particular API. So this is which means that the deployment has worked fine. So now what we will finally look at is how when a developer commits, how do I ensure the commit will trigger a build, and when there's a new successful build, how does it get deployed automatically? And I do as one change, I should see the end-to-end flow where the change is deployed, and I should be able to see the deployed change working, right? So one thing, now we enabled the continuous integration in the pipeline. So here in the deployment, we can do the same. So here I have under the artifact, I have a trigger. So I'm going to enable the continuous deployment also, which means that whenever creates a release, every time a new build is available. So somebody commits, there's a successful build which generates an artifact, which will trigger a deployment here, and it will deploy into the staging. Right, so I've enabled that as well. So now just checking whether I have enabled the trigger for the main branch. So I have, yes, it's here. So now let me go here and I'll do a small change in the API. So let's say I'll just say, and then I'll say hello and the name, welcome to the API world. Okay, I'm just saying a sample text just to show the change. So now I do a commit. Well, now this commit should have triggered a build, which has happened here. So it has detected a change. Now it will go ahead and build and generate the artifacts that are needed for the release to work. So let's wait for a minute or so. Okay, so now it will go ahead and build the restore, build, publish, and generate the artifact. Okay, so now it has built and there's an artifact available. So I should see a release 2 triggered automatically. Now I see, because there was a successful build, it has initiated a deployment, a new deployment, which gets deployed onto the dev environment, the development stage here. And so what I've done is I've just done a code change, and everything end to end, it will build, deploy, and we'll be able to see the new change in a minute by now, right? So this is the the basic step or process that we follow to create a CI/CD pipeline. Again, as I said, this is for a .NET API. Now for different technologies, the process remains the same. Your tool set, your commands may vary. Okay, so now it is deployed. Now I'll go here and I'll do the same API call. So now I can see the new change which I had done in the code. So which this basically indicates or shows you how an automated CI/CD can be done for a given source code, a given project using Azure DevOps pipeline and deployment pipelines.